Frank Lucas fell in shackles. Bumpy Johnson's end is legend, but Frank Matthews rose higher than either, then vanished without a trace, along with over $100 million, leaving federal agents searching and his rivals stunned. No photos, no funerals, no confirmation of faith or fate, just a blank space where a kingpin's legacy should be. So how did the most wanted man in America simply disappear? The answer begins long before that last vanishing act. Frank Matthews was born into hard poverty in Durham, North Carolina in 1944. By age 14, he had already organized a crew of local kids, stealing chickens from farms on the city's edge. The first time he was caught, he did not run. He picked up a brick and attacked the farmer. That single act, raw, direct, and ruthless, landed him in the Raleigh State Reformatory for Boys in 1960. He spent a year locked up, surrounded by older, harder criminals, absorbing lessons that went far beyond street fights. On release, Matthews headed north to Philadelphia. He did not find honest work. Instead, he slipped into the city's numbers racket, a street lottery that ran on trust, fast math, and the ability to remember hundreds of bets without writing anything down. Matthews learned the trade from men like Major Coxon, a rising figure in the black underworld who ran numbers out of West Philly. Coxon taught him more than how to collect bets and pay winners. He showed Matthews how to keep the books tight, how to spot a cheat, and how to balance the risk of violence with the need for reliable business. The numbers game was more than a hustle. It was the backbone of black neighborhoods, a shadow economy that paid out to winners and greased palms from street level up to City Hall. Matthews watched as Coxon navigated both the police and the black mafia, always keeping a step ahead. He saw how money moved quietly in small bills through back rooms and corner stores. He saw how a man's reputation depended on two things: his willingness to enforce debts and his ability to keep accounts straight. Matthews excelled at both. He handled disputes with a cold logic that left no room for weakness. He made sure every dollar was tracked, every payout verified. By the time he left Philadelphia in 1963, chased out by police heat and rival threats, he was not just a street tough. He was a student of underground finance, carrying with him the skills to build something bigger. The violence of his youth had fused with a new discipline, one that would let him scale up from numbers to narcotics and from petty cash to millions. The lessons of Philadelphia would shape every move he made as he searched for his own supply, his own empire, and a way to outrun the fate that claimed so many before him. In 1965, Frank Matthews made a decision that would change the American drug trade forever. The numbers game had taught him the value of trust and reputation, but it had also shown the limits of street hustling. Heroin was where the real money flowed. Matthews approached the Gambino and Bonanno families looking to buy in. Both turned him away. The mafia, tightly holding the keys to the French Connection pipeline, saw no reason to let an outsider, especially a black operator, into their business. For most, that would have been the end of the road. Matthews saw it as an opening. Through a Harlem contact named Spanish Raymond Marquez, Matthews met Rolando Lucas Gonzalez Nunez, a Cuban exile with deep connections in South America. Gonzalez was more than a gambler. He ran a casino on San Andres Island and had direct access to Colombian cocaine and heroin. Matthews negotiated hard. He walked away with his first kilogram of cocaine for $20,000, paid in cash, with a promise of more to come. No mafia middlemen, no tribute, no gatekeepers, just a handshake and a supply line that bypassed the old order. This new alliance unlocked a flow of narcotics that the mafia could not touch. Matthews used Gonzalez's shipments to build a network that stretched from New York to Philadelphia and down the East Coast. He became known for the purity of his product and the reliability of his deliveries. Dealers lined up, drawn by prices that undercut the Italians and quality that kept customers loyal. Matthews did not just buy drugs, he bought independence. Every kilogram that landed in Brooklyn was a statement. The rules had changed. He moved quietly, spreading risk across trusted lieutenants and never keeping too much product in one place. He paid his suppliers on time and never shorted them. Word got around that Matthews was fair but ruthless. If a shipment went missing, he handled it personally. If a partner tried to cheat him, the response was swift and final. By late 1966, his operation was pulling in millions. The mafia took notice, but Matthews was already too big to ignore and too well connected to stop. What set him apart was not just the volume or the reach. It was his willingness to cut the mafia out entirely, to deal directly with Latin American sources. Matthews had found a loophole in the system and exploited it with surgical precision. The old codes did not apply. The heroin pipeline was now open to anyone bold enough to seize it, and Matthews had just become its most important customer. Matthews ran his empire like a Fortune 500 logistics chief, not a street hustler. At the heart of his operation stood a network that reached across 21 states, stretching from New York down the Interstate 95 corridor and out to the Midwest. Brooklyn served as the main hub. From there, heroin and cocaine moved through a system of lieutenants, each controlling their own city or region. The flow was constant. Shipments arrived from South America and Europe, were broken down in safe houses, then dispatched in cars with hidden compartments or in the hands of trusted couriers who knew the value of silence. Every kilo came with a price tag, $26,000, cash up front, no exceptions. That was cheaper than what the mafia offered, and the product was purer. Matthews cut out the middlemen, dealing directly with French connection suppliers and Cuban contacts like Rolando Lucas Gonzalez Nunez. This not only slashed costs, but guaranteed a steady supply. Dealers from Boston, Baltimore, Atlanta, and Detroit all paid the Brooklyn price, knowing Matthews delivered on time and in full. Orders were placed through coded phone calls or messages sent by courier. Payments moved the same way, bundles of small bills counted and recounted, then logged in ledgers that never left the room. Matthews insisted on records. Every shipment, every payout, every lost kilo, nothing escaped the books. Trusted clerks kept handwritten ledgers, tracking who owed what, which cities had paid, which shipments had gone missing. The ledgers were the backbone of the business. Without them, the whole system would collapse into chaos. Matthews reviewed the ledgers himself, often late at night, searching for errors or signs of theft. Mistakes weren't tolerated. If a city came up short, the local boss got a visit. If a courier skimmed from a shipment, he disappeared. The scale dwarfed anything the Italian mafia had managed. Matthews' network handled tons of heroin a year, moving more product in a month than some syndicates did in a year. He coordinated supply lines from Marseille to Miami using European connections to bypass the traditional mafia pipeline. His crews operated with military discipline. They rotated cars, switched safe houses, and changed meeting spots weekly. Each city had its own system, but the rules came from Brooklyn, and all roads led back to Matthews' headquarters. By 1971, the DEA estimated Matthews controlled the cutting, packaging, and sale of heroin in every major East Coast city. His organization was invisible to outsiders, but inside it ran on precision. The ledgers weren't just records, they were the key to his power, and the reason federal agents would spend years searching for them after Matthews vanished. Easter Sunday, 1972. Club Harlem in Atlantic City was packed shoulder to shoulder. Nearly 800 people pressed into the heat and noise. Tyrone Palmer, known as Mr. Millionaire, Frank Matthews' main man in Philadelphia, stood near the bar. Just after midnight, gunfire erupted. The first shots dropped Palmer where he stood. Bullets tore through the crowd. Men and women scrambling for cover, glass shattering, tables flipping. 5 people died on that floor, Palmer among them. 26 more were wounded, some left paralyzed, others scarred for life. The music stopped, but the chaos rolled on for hours as police and ambulances tried to make sense of the carnage. Nearly 800 witnesses filled the club that night. Yet when detectives canvassed the scene, silence met every question. Not a single person was willing to testify. Some said they did not see anything. Others simply turned away. The official count, 799 potential witnesses, 0 statements, 0 prosecutions, became a statistic that haunted Atlantic City law enforcement for years. The police knew who the players were. The Philadelphia Black Mafia, feuding with Matthews' organization, had brought their war into public view. But the code of the street was stronger than any badge. People feared what might happen if they spoke. In neighborhoods already battered by drugs and violence, trust in the system had long since vanished. The aftermath reached far beyond Club Harlem. Families mourned loved ones who never came home. Survivors nursed wounds that would never fully heal. Some left the city, unable to face the memories. Local newspapers ran headlines about the bloodbath, but the deeper story, a community paralyzed by fear and a justice system unable to break the silence, rarely made the front page. For Matthews, the massacre was both a warning and a shield. The violence kept rivals in check, but it also sent a message to anyone thinking of cooperating with the authorities: speak out and you risk everything. The ledgers tracking debts and shipments survived, but the human cost was buried in unmarked graves and unfinished police reports. The silence that followed would echo through every missing page and vanished witness in the years to come. Bumpy Johnson carried a Bible everywhere he went. In Harlem, he was as famous for his Sunday church attendance as for the muscle he brought to Lenox Avenue. Frank Lucas, too, was a fixture in the pews, his donations to local churches and public displays of faith woven into his legend. Their stories are shaped by the rituals of belief: funerals packed with mourners, pastors who spoke their names from the pulpit, community elders who remembered them as men of both sin and repentance. Frank Matthews, by contrast, left no such trail. Church bulletins from Harlem and Queens in the late 1960s and early 1970s are silent on his name. No photographs surface of him shaking hands with a pastor, and no newsletters list him among the donors. In interviews, family members recall little about prayer or faith-based gatherings. If Matthews turned to God, he did so in private, or not at all. The records that document his empire are meticulous, but when it comes to faith, there is only a void. This absence stands out. In a world where public piety could buy a man legitimacy, Matthews kept his spiritual life, if he had one, out of sight. The men who built empires before him made faith part of their public armor. Johnson's mosque attendance offered a shield against critics. Lucas's charity dinners and church ties softened the edges of his reputation. For Matthews, there is no evidence of sermons, blessings, or even a funeral after his disappearance. He left behind no grave for mourners, no marker for the faithful. The question hangs in the air. Was Matthews' silence a strategy or simply indifference? Did he see faith as a weakness in a world ruled by suspicion and betrayal? Or did he practice quietly, trusting no one with that part of himself? The lack of documentation becomes its own kind of evidence, a gap that invites speculation, a mystery that resists easy answers. As the search for Matthews' fortune and fate continues, so does the search for the man behind the ledgers, a kingpin whose public life left no room for public faith, and whose private convictions, if any, remain as hidden as the millions he took with him. The vanished money and the vanished man are linked by the same unanswered question. Who was Frank Matthews when the cameras were off, and what codes governed the life he kept out of sight? The mystery endures, and with it the urge to find a final payoff. April 1973 brought a deal that should have cemented Frank Matthews' dominance, but instead it cracked the foundation beneath his empire. Ernie Coco Corraluzzo, a trusted associate of the Genovese crime family, arranged a sale of 40 kilograms of heroin for $375,000 to be exchanged at the Waldorf Astoria. Matthews, out on bail and under federal scrutiny, did not blink at the risk. The money was delivered through an intermediary, counted out in a hotel suite that had seen dozens of quiet arrangements before this one. But this time, the rules changed. Corraluzzo vanished. No drugs, no explanation, just a trail leading straight to the Bahamas, where Corraluzzo disappeared with every dollar. The betrayal landed like a body blow. Matthews had built his reputation on reliability, on the promise that every deal would close, every payment honored. Now he faced a gaping hole in his finances and a public humiliation. Word spread fast among the city's underworld. If Matthews could be taken for nearly $400,000, who else might try their luck? The loss forced his hand. Associates demanded answers. Rivals circled, sensing weakness. Meanwhile, law enforcement watched, waiting for a misstep from a man suddenly made vulnerable. Surprise came from an unexpected angle. George Ramos, a Cuban connection once considered loyal, began cooperating with federal agents, giving testimony that threatened to expose Matthews' network. The combination of financial loss, betrayal by Corraluzzo, and the looming threat of Ramos's cooperation left Matthews boxed in. The urgency to secure his ledgers and cover his tracks grew by the day. In the underworld, trust is currency, and Matthews had just been robbed of both. Federal agents swept through Matthews' properties in the weeks after his disappearance, searching for the ledgers that had once underpinned his entire empire. In Brooklyn, they found a safe pried open and empty closets where cash and records were rumored to be stacked to the ceiling. The ledgers, which tracked every shipment, payment, and debt across 21 states, had vanished as completely as Matthews himself. Case files from the Drug Enforcement Administration and the New York Police Department, once thick with surveillance notes and informant tips, now show entire sections blacked out or missing. Requests for evidence from federal archives return pages stamped with heavy redactions, names, dates, entire transactions erased from the official record. One lead pointed south. An Internal Revenue Service agent, acting on a tip, rushed to a small bank in Durham, North Carolina, just days after Matthews's vanishing. The manager said bluntly, "You just missed him." There was no security footage and no withdrawal slip, only a rumor that a man matching Matthews' description had been moving cash through local accounts. Property records in the area hint at small real estate purchases made in relatives' names. Each one is legal and unremarkable on its own, but together they suggest a quiet dispersal of millions. Theories multiply in the absence of hard evidence. Some investigators believe Matthews escaped to Venezuela or the Bahamas, using old connections from his drug routes. Others think he never left the country, hiding in plain sight, protected by layers of family and silence. There are whispers of law enforcement complicity. Files that disappeared, leads that went cold, a reward that drew no credible tips. The missing ledgers remain central to every theory. Without them, there is no map of the money, no list of names, no blueprint for what Matthews built or where it all went. The mystery persists, locked behind redacted pages and unanswered questions. Today, Frank Matthews' disappearance remains one of organized crime's greatest unsolved mysteries. As financial crimes and shadow networks grow more sophisticated, stories like his remind us that some fortunes and their consequences simply vanish into the cracks of the system. The unanswered questions are not just about one man, they are about the blind spots we still cannot close. What would you do if $100 million just disappeared?